My mom used to like to tell the story that she marked me with my love of horses. She says it was because she walked the bridle paths next to our home in Muttontown, Long Island when she was pregnant with me. I honestly can't remember a time that I wasn't crazy about horses. Every trip our family went on, my parents indulged me in riding. Whether it was a dude ranch in Wyoming, riding with family friends in Idaho, or sending me off to my cousin's ranch in Nebraska, they were definitely trying to get the horse bug out of me. We had moved to Los Angeles, and my love of horses didn't seem like it would be subsiding anytime soon, so my parents finally gave in to my begging and let me have riding lessons at Will Rogers State Park. It had been humorist Will Rogers' practice polo field, the only regulation-size outdoor field in the Los Angeles County. The property, which sits in the Santa Monica Mountains in the Pacific Palisades area, had stables and its ranch house, which is still open to the public. It was all made a gift to the state by Rogers' wife Betty in 1944 after her death. The deed contained a provision that the polo field be maintained in perpetuity. The property has amazing views. Will Rogers was a real horseman, and 2 of his favorite polo ponies are even buried on the property. I took riding lessons there starting at age 8. I had a favorite horse called Baldy. I got to ride him in the very first horse show there for kids. The riding school wasn't all that popular with the polo players, though. They pretty much thought it was a nuisance having us around. You had to join the Polo Association just to be able to ride at Will Rogers, even if you were a kid. The riding school and the stables for the kids were forced to close many times because of the tensions with the polo activities. And as I've gone back over the years to hike, sometimes that's still the case. Sometimes it's there, sometimes not. We loved riding the trails. It was long before the mountain bikers and the popularity of the hikers, so we just let our horses go full gallop up to Inspiration Point to see that amazing view. I also love the trails with the beautiful eucalyptus trees. I've always marveled how this gem was just off of Sunset Boulevard. Long before Sunset was so busy, I even rode my bike to Will Rogers, or I took the public bus, because my mom wasn't going to be a chauffeur. That was part of the deal with me horseback riding. Got a little older, C.D. LeBlanc, the manager of the Will Rogers Polo Club, noticed how tall I was for my age, and that I'd been hanging out there for a while with the horses. And he started letting me exercise some of his polo ponies. He also boarded horses across from Paul Revere Junior High School on a piece of property that bordered Mandeville and Sullivan Canyons. The horse bug didn't seem to be leaving anytime soon, so my next step was to share a pony. I was now in 7th grade at Paul Revere Junior High School, which incidentally had been a polo field at one time too, until the property was sold to the Los Angeles Board of Education and the school opened in 1955. In fact, in 1932, the equestrian events of the Olympic Games were held there. When most people think of urban Los Angeles, horses are not something that immediately come to mind. Yet just like Will Rogers, another quick turn right off Sunset Boulevard just west of Mandeville Canyon brings you to Sullivan Canyon. And lucky for me, it was right across the street from Paul Revere Junior High. Every day after school, I would walk up Old Ranch Road. That's the main canyon road that dead ends at renowned architect and builder's Cliff May's old house called Mandalay. It used to be the only house with gates, but nowadays that's a prevalent sight, unfortunately. Cliff May is credited for creating the California ranch-style home in the late 1930s, complete with corrals and open stalls. They were built to blend into the landscape of the canyon. The first home in Sullivan Canyon was built around 1906, and the local folklore credits the naming of the canyon to one of its first squatters, a Civil War veteran named Sullivan. But that's a whole nother story. Let's get back to the horses. The riding ring, which was a little over 8 acres, was acquired in 1961 by the Los Angeles Unified School District in anticipation of a West Side enrollment explosion, and the elementary school that they had planned for the site never was built. That's how we got to use it as a riding ring. You had to become a member of the Sullivan Canyon Riders Club because of the liability, and we entered into 3-year contracts with the school district to lease the land. The pony I shared was named Pegasus, or Peggy for short, and boy could that pony jump. The whole setup with the kids riding was all very casual. We just wore jeans and tennis shoes, or Clarks or Wallabies, which was a really popular and ugly shoe at the time. We could ride the trails over to Will Rogers up over Rustic Canyon. It was a huge adventure. We were just free-range kids with no parents ever around. We always wondered what the wrought iron gates were and the many concrete steps that only seemed to lead to a power station and water tank were. It wasn't until I was an adult that I learned that the gate was designed by a famous black architect named Paul Williams for a mansion that never got built, and all the other buildings were part of the infrastructure meant for the house. The neighbors across the street from me when I grew up had a house designed by him, and so did my best friend who lived 3 doors up. Oops, I digressed again. Back to the ponies. In the canyon between Sullivan and Will Rogers was also a Boy Scout camp called Camp Giuseppe. My brother actually even went there. I rode Peggy on this trail over to compete in a horse show at Will Rogers one time because he wouldn't get in the trailer. The view from the top of the trail of Sullivan Canyon was so beautiful. We loved riding our horses on the riverbeds in the back of the canyon. There was never a soul in sight, and the horses would just take off running. Back in the early 70s, we even rode our horses over to the Brentwood Country Mart, and I had a friend who had a pony at her house on Avondale Avenue, so someday we'd meet and ride down Rockingham to buy ice cream at 31 Flavors that was on Sam Sunny Boulevard. I quickly outgrew Peggy and got a rescue horse named Samantha. She was pretty crazy and spirited, and my dad sometimes had to come and help me even get her bridle on. That was the same time that Sullivan Canyon had its first play day event. It was really just a tiny horse show, and my corral mate let me ride her horse in the show. Her horse's name was Copperfield, and I even got a ribbon, much to my surprise, since I'd never ridden him before. My next horse was great. His name was Coco. I originally kept him at the top of Old Ranch Road in a corral that's next to the trail at the back of the canyon. It was a nice long walk each day after school. In those days, we did everything in regards to care for the horses. We cleaned the corral, we groomed them, we fed them, so you had to go every day. There was no main stable, and you just rented an open corral for about $30 a month from someone who had one in the front of their house. Many times, I just rode with a saddle pad and my shorts even. Riding back then was just the pure joy of loving your horse and having fun. Sometimes we rode on the vacant lots or galloped up and down the paths that used to be in front of all the houses. Those days are long gone, as the canyon is now quite developed with giant houses. I was at the corral every breathing moment, it seemed, when I wasn't at school. And to buy things I wanted for my horse, I had to babysit to earn the money. When I look back at my old photo album, the prices of what things were seem like such a deal now. Special highlight where I boarded Coco was getting to see a baby colt be born. It was so natural, there was no vet involved, it just happened. Coco was a horse that I got because someone had abandoned him in a pasture, and all I had to do was pay $150 to cover the back pasture rent. I had no idea what he could do, because first I just needed to have him gain some weight and learn to trust me. It turned out though that he could pull a wagon, jump, barrel race, and was a very competent trail horse. He would do anything for me because I saved him. I entered him in horse shows at Will Rogers too. The 70s were a thriving time for riding in LA. Will Rogers had lots of activities, and so did a spot called Crestwood Stables, up at the top of Kenner Canyon. We would ride the trails over the top of Mandeville Canyon to get there. I did well in one little horse show there. Crestwood Stables ended up getting flooded out so many times it's no longer there, but apparently now they have million-dollar homes built there. I'm not sure they know about the flooding. Maybe with the drought and all, it just hasn't happened yet. I later moved Coco down to another corral on Old Oak Lane. It had a great tack room and a really nice bridle path that led to the riding ring. By this time the riding ring had gotten a little fancier. The barrels had been freshly painted, and so did the jumping poles, and a new outside hunting jump course had been put in. We loved doing that. Sullivan Canyon almost lost this wonderful horse culture when in 2002 the school board was going to sell the property to a developer. But thankfully, Steven Spielberg, the director, stepped in and donated $12 million to save it. Now there's an organization called Sullivan Canyon Preservation Association. It's much more money to ride there than it was when I was a kid. We had annual dues of about $100, but the grounds are fancier now and they have lots more rules. But that's how everything is, isn't it? My final horse stop was Point Dume in Malibu, or Point Dume as some people call it. I had been buying my horse feed at the Malibu feed bin for years, and when the house I boarded my horse at in Sullivan Canyon was sold, I needed to find a new home for Coco. Plus, I needed a nice family to ride him because I'd be away at college for a good part of the year. So the owner of the feed bin knew someone where Coco could have a nice spot and be able to spend his retirement years dipping his legs in the ocean. And I could see him whenever I was home. Point Dume was also very undeveloped still in the early 1980s. We could just ride on the dirt paths alongside the houses on the street. Even after I graduated college, I would still go and see Coco and ride him. He lived to be 32 years old. Riding horses in LA made a huge impact on me, and I know I was very, very lucky. I'll close my story with this quote I love from Will Rogers. "A man that don't love a horse, there is something the matter with him. If he has no sympathy for the man that does love horses, then there is something worse the matter with him."